We're live, Mark.
Just the way I like it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, joined by my eminent co-host and co-chairman of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, also the host of his awesome show, The Rational Egoist. You should check it out. Now, hopefully some of you caught Michael's debate yesterday with a quote unquote fellow objectivist. Yeah, this is somebody who
I don't know if he is or not. It's hard to tell. I'm not sure.
Okay, but
I don't even know if he claims it. He does co-host the Ayn Rand fan club. That much I know.
So he co-hosts the Ayn Rand fan club. So we must assume there's something about objectivism.
Sure. And I believe he used to work for ARI.
Even more frightening that he used to work for the Ayn Rand Institute. One of my favorite places on earth, and the proposition before them and during the debate was, is Donald Trump a good person and a good president? And I think from moment one there, Michael, you overwhelmed him because the first proposition was, is Donald Trump a good person? We started with that. And I don't know how a man comes back from the list of horrible things that you were able to dig up. I don't even know if he had to dig that deeply either, that Donald Trump has done that should demonstrate to any person with a brain that he's not a decent person. Now, some people will rationalize that and say, okay, good people still don't have to be, that you don't have to be a good person to be the president of the United States. You don't have to be a good person to be a good actor. You don't have to be, none of that matters with respect to the job performance that a person does. People are complicated after all. And people seem to be willing to give Trump a lot of latitude because he seems to be the most boisterous and, well, I can't say articulate, but certainly loudest and crudest opposition to the left. And they seem to like that. It satisfies something deep in their psyches with respect to that. But I mean, I didn't see how he could come back even from the list of terrible things that Donald Trump has done. Some of which I didn't even know.
Well, I am blessed with a very good memory, and when you combine my memory with Google, and Grok, I was able to find everything I needed to find very quickly. As far as how somebody comes back, I'm someone that anyone that listens to me knows I hate to impute intention or motivation to other people because facts are observable. The reason that someone does something that's not, and human behavior is often complex and multi-determined, and I like to be charitable. But it's very difficult when people defend Trump to that degree. It's very difficult for me to ascribe it to anything but willful blindness, rationalization. This morning, for instance, I've made a post where I asked a rhetorical question. It was obviously rhetorical, and my conclusion was obvious as well. And I said, what if Trump doesn't have a plan? What if this is just an immoral, erratic person, implementing policy, something along those lines? And a guy I have known for, 35 years or so, chimed in and said, enough is enough already. Why can't we just let it play out and see how he does? So I responded, well, anybody who understands philosophy, economics, politics, and history knows how it's going to play out, knows how it's going to fall out, knows what's going to happen. And he says to me, well, that's what they said his first term, but everyone was happy. And I looked it up because I knew that everyone was not happy. And I said, well, he had a 41% approval rating. So how is everyone happy? And instead of just saying, oh, I didn't know that you're right, he responds with, yeah, well, arguing politics isn't my thing, so I'm out of here. You should let it go. And I said, well, then why did you chime in? You know what I mean? Like, you chimed in with a viewpoint. Nobody asked you to. He said, because I'm tired of seeing this stuff in my Facebook feed. You need to argue better stuff. And I said, well, listen, 4,000 other people follow me on Facebook. Am I supposed to change my postings because you don't like it? If you don't like it, don't follow me. Simple solution. But of course, the point wasn't not follow me. The point was he likes Trump. But when faced with facts, he just responds with a rationalization, which so many of them do.
Well, it just shows how disgusted the normal population is with the crazy left and their usurpation of the culture, and they appreciate even a buffoon like Trump fighting back against the left. Unfortunately, I think you need a more concentrated and rational approach to defeat the left. I mean, if you believe Peikoff, it's the left will eat their own, and they're not really a threat. It's the right, the misintegrated folks, not the disintegrated folks.
Well, that's not what Peikoff says now.
Well, he supported Trump.
He did.
A lot of people think that Trump is doing this art of the deal thing, so that none of these tariffs are actually serious considerations. They're just a means to get people to the negotiating table. But there's two paradoxical things going on at the same time. Either there are means of getting people to the negotiating table so that you can bring tariffs down to essentially zero and make it a completely free trade economy, or you're trying to bring manufacturing back to America. Now, he claims to be wanting to do the latter, to bring manufacturing back to America, which means that this is a 2 or 3 decade long event that he is attempting to make happen. I think essentially turning us back to the 19th century, to be honest with you, for reasons that we could discuss later. But that the tariffs are going to be in place for as long as it takes to re-industrialize, quote unquote, America, or remanufacturize America. So you can't have it both ways. And it seems like the Trump people want to have it both ways. Don't you think he satisfies something psychological in them? Because they've been marginalized by the left for so long. They've been made to feel irrelevant and voiceless.
I hate that language, Mark. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I hate it. But I do.
It's because it's actually a left talking.
It just reeks. Let me just say, I don't disagree with you that that's the reaction. What I disagree with is and this is what they've actually embraced. It's the language of victimization.
Yes.
Right. It's they've alienated us. They've made us feel bad. They've taken our jobs with, affirmative action, yada, yada, yada. Huh?
It's true. It's the language of victimization. Both you and I hate that crap because we like self-determination, and we understand people are volitional, and you can't really call yourself you don't have to respond to the external.
Well, that's why I think it's bullshit, because you don't have to respond to affirmative action and wokeism with Donald Trump, right? You don't have to respond by claiming to be a victim. And it's just, the thing that I used to like about conservatives, about Republicans, was that they didn't accept that even when it came to blacks who've obviously suffered slavery, discrimination, everything, their line used to be, it doesn't matter what you've been through. That's not an excuse for crime. It's not an excuse for unemployment. You've got to, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. I love that message.
Black conservatives.
No, I'm talking about conservatives talking about black people.
Okay.
In general, right? But now all of a sudden we're the victims. We're the victims of everything. And I can't stand it. And I definitely don't think, not that I don't think wokeism is worth fighting or critical theory is worth fighting, but you don't fight it with nothing, with just a raving lunatic who changes his viewpoint or policies from day to day. You fight it with sound philosophy, with sound arguments, if what you want to replace it is going to stand the test of time.
I couldn't agree with you more. However, the only thing that reared its ugly head during the height of, I think, the left's abuse of its cultural dominance is this guy. So clearly we live in an intellectual and philosophical vacuum. And clearly the people looked at this insanity and saw that, well, we need a strong man to get us out of this. And along came Trump and presented himself as the strong man who would be able to get everyone out of this. And that includes people in the Democratic Party who are just fed up with the insanity and the nihilism of the left. They felt that this is the guy that will carry us out of this morass. But we see that you can't have a pragmatist, a moral pragmatist, an amoralist or immoralist, even somebody who doesn't believe in political principles and thinks that anybody can be Like, you can have a deal with anybody, irrespective of their moral premises. You can't have a guy like that leading us out of the morass. In fact, he's oftentimes going to inadvertently lead us into it again, which I
Yes.
see happening now with the state of the economy. And yet still the people on the right are justifying these tariffs. They're working overtime on Fox trying to justify how we have the upper hand with China, which may be true for a number of reasons, but it's still, I think Trump's goal of bringing manufacturing back to America means there's a ginormous infrastructure that can't handle any, even if we win this tariff argument to a degree, we don't have any of the infrastructure to be able to create the jobs and to justify the claims that Trump is making.
Well, I agree with you there. So not much to discuss.
So speaking of, anyway, so my entire point for even bringing up the discussion between you and that cat was that people should watch the debate, especially people who are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome on the right. You folks who are so emotionally connected to Trump and think he's your messianic figure. You should check out the conversation. I'm sorry to say for the other fella, it was a complete and total beatdown. And this isn't just me being a fan of yours saying this. This is to me the objective truth. There was nothing but vagary and emotional comebacks from the other guy. There were no straight facts. In the end, if the guy is an objectivist, he's going to have to acknowledge that the facts are on your side and that he should start changing his opinion of Donald Trump. And you folks with Trump derangement syndrome, maybe this will be your psychological therapy session. It'll talk you off the ledge, the Trump ledge, and bring you back into reality. And that reality says American Capitalist Party.
Yes. Nice, Mark. I like that. I like the way you did that. That was good. The segue, you're a great segueist, if I might coin a neologism. Because to bring that and tie it to the American Capitalist Party, that was skillful. That was great.
Well, I get there by wide degrees of insanity. As usual, the article that you sent me trumps, and sorry to use that term, but it is a word, trumps the 3 articles I sent you from the Epoch Times. I like this article from the Foundation for Economic Education because it's about the Supreme Court, which we are told now should be relatively sane, with 6 members being quote unquote conservatives. However, they refused to listen to a case called Bowers versus Oneida County Industrial Development Agency. This is a case regarding eminent domain. Now, this is a particular bugaboo for me. It's got to be a particular bugaboo for you. I know it is. Talk about it many times on your show, look, guys, this is a scary concept. Michael, I'm gonna let you take it away a little bit because talk a little bit about eminent domain, what its limitations were supposed to be originally, and what's gone on with it over the last, I guess 150 or so years or more, that's made it into this monster that it is now. And why would a conservative Supreme Court that's supposed to be originalist in nature and should probably go to the Takings Clause and should probably go to the Fifth Amendment as a restraint on eminent domain, why did they choose not to take this given the justification for taking this person's property? Go ahead. We'll talk a little bit, maybe more about the Bowers versus Oneida County. Well,
first, okay, so eminent domain is basically pragmatism built into the Constitution. It's basically, we need something and somebody owns property standing in the way of us having our something, maybe roads, a post office, a government building, whatever. So the Fifth Amendment allows, it doesn't actually, I don't think, use the term eminent domain, but it says that public property shall not be taken, private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. So basically the government can take your stuff, take your home, as long as they pay you what they determine is acceptable. And then they can, put public amenities there of some sort. Now, I'm totally against even that. I think it's absolutely absurd. I think and the reason I care so much about it is because it's an assault on property rights. Because my right to life necessitates that I have the right to the property that I can earn. And if a government can come take that property, then it isn't really mine. It's theirs, and I'm just holding it in what I want to say escrow, but it's not offshore. But basically, I'm holding it in abeyance until they decide that they want it. So in 2005, in New London, Connecticut, not very far from me, there was a case where they wanted to take these homes to build, I believe, a Pfizer factory, a place for a Pfizer building. And the woman said, no, you're not taking my stuff for Pfizer. And the government stepped in and said, basically, because the public is going to benefit from having this business there, from having Pfizer there, we can take your property. So they switched it from public use to public benefit, right? In that case. Clearly an assault on property rights, even worse than the original eminent domain, because at least that's constitutional. This doesn't even have the markings of constitutionality, although the court did find that it's constitutional. And by the way, this is one of the reasons I've never liked Trump, is because he wholeheartedly supports this type of thing. He basically says, look, you can't let private property owners stand in the way of progress. And my view is, if you want progress, you can't stand in the way of private property.
Wow.
Right.
That's an enormous statement that we should let settle on the audience right now, that Trump actually thinks progress over private property.
Sure.
You have to let that marinate, because he's a Republican who's supposed to stand for private property rights.
Well, he's constantly touted as a capitalist, right?
So constantly touted as a capitalist, right, who's used eminent domain in the past to.
Oh yeah, when he was just a businessman, which is one of the reasons he's such a big fan. So, flash forward, there was a case recently, and I don't remember exactly what the case is, but the gist of it is, the local government wants to take a woman's property and give it to her competitor. I mean, that just blows the mind just to even think of such a thing. So it was challenged, and the Supreme Court refused to hear it. And now in legal terms, that means they refused to grant certiorari. Why they didn't hear it, I don't know. The court gets, they're inundated with writs of certiorari where people want to have the Supreme Court hear their case. They literally can't hear them all. This seems like one that, especially a so-called originalist court, a conservative court, a court that wants to uphold the Constitution, property rights, that sort of thing. You'd think they'd want to take this, but they didn't. I think they should have, but I don't wear one of the black robes, and I don't think I will, but I think they should have.
Well, that's what I referred to in the beginning. I mean, this originalist court should be interested in hearkening back to the original intent of the Fifth Amendment, and they should use that as a standard to, I think, strike this deal down and rule in favor of the person who's bringing the case. I mean, the details were something like this person was going to build a medical facility on land that they were developing, right? But right next door to am I thinking of Bauer's case now?
I think that's Kelo, but I'm not sure. I'm you know what I mean? I just read this article one time, and it kind of went out of my head. But I know the gist of it. I know what the principle involved is. I just don't remember the explicit facts of the case.
Something about is they were going to build a medical facility next to a rival, and of course they were going to be a competitor, and the other side appealed to the development agency, industrial development agency, and
the case is Bowers versus Oneida County Industrial Development Agency. The case involved a county confiscating a private developer's land to give it to his business rival. Yeah. Brian Bowers, a local developer, was under contract to purchase land in Utica, New York, and planned to construct a medical office building. A neighboring medical facility asked the Oneida County Industrial Development Agency to take his land so that it could build a parking lot, thereby eliminating its competition. So that's the case. By the way, the article was written by Rachel Chu, I believe it's pronounced, or Chiu. It's CHIU. It's on the Foundation for Economic Education, so anybody can read it if they're interested in it. It's a very good article.
Yeah, so it's difficult for me to, first of all, the fact that they took the case, that they took the property away from the person to deprive him of the capacity to compete with the other side. That's one thing. But the fact that the opponents, the people that took the property, used it to level it and make it into a parking lot is just a double.
Well, but Mark, doesn't it just show? I mean, it starts off with first you have the right to property is blatantly violated, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it just comes up with corruption. Now, we're not in the meetings. We don't know if they were paid off or what. I have no idea. I know it reeks of corruption, right? when you've basically eliminated a business's competition by giving the other business's property, it smells bad, right? And that's what happens. Once you grant the government the power to do things, they're going to abuse the power. It's like I remember back in 2000 when John McCain kept talking about we need campaign finance reform, because people are bribing the government. And my thinking was, well, why not take away the government's ability to grant favors? Instead of limiting the free speech of American citizens and companies, why not limit the government's ability to reward them? And then, it doesn't matter, what they donate. But people don't generally view it that way. And so, well, we get what we have here today, which is what we had last week.
Yes, you end the regulatory state, you end lobbying, you end the influence peddling that goes on in Washington simply by ending the regulatory state. The regulatory state gives these politicians the power to control other people's property, to control their franchises, to control their expansion. And that's an extremely powerful cudgel to hold over the heads of private property owners. And of course, people are going to go in there in Washington and attempt to influence which way the laws go, because this is what we've become, a spoil system democracy, where if you can control the levers of power, then you more or less are able to give yourself privileges that other people do not have. So the lobby system comes out of, it's an example of, it's a result of the regulatory state, which is inherently corrupt. It must be inherently corrupt, and it has to lead to bribery. That's how you get the spectacle of senators entering Congress as middle-class Americans, or sometimes lower middle class, and leaving worth $10 million or more, because these companies are attempting to influence them politically. All of that should be against the law. That's terrible. There's tons of ways in which Congress should be separated from economics, both personally and on the governmental level, so that they don't benefit from their position. Limiting the regulatory state would end much of this. Yeah, you'd think.
And getting the American Capitalist Party in office would accomplish that.
Yes, I think we'd need to have multiple people in office, since there is only 4-year terms, and certainly people in the legislature, and definitely a philosophical revolution in America is needed. Because remember, at the time of the American Revolution, I think there was the concept of rugged individualism, and individualism was a general moral proposition that I think everybody took for granted. Right. America evolved the concept of English rights to the broader concept of individual rights. And I think this was just a part of the American fabric, because fortunately our distance from the mother country required a policy of them basically leaving us alone and letting us govern ourselves. And that created a particular kind of person. Now, that was the psychology of America in the 18th century going forward. That's no longer the psychology of America now. And so what's required is a deep philosophical re-education. Now, hopefully, there's oftentimes that political movements can spur academic and cultural movements. And we hope that our political movement can spur an academic and cultural movement towards individualism again. Are you looking at the
Robert Nasir, he was talking about yesterday's debate. He said it was unfair, as I was clearly fighting an unarmed man.
Never bring an atomic weapon to a Liebowitz fight, because he's gonna bring something else entirely, like a fusion weapon.
Hydrogen. bring in some good hydrogen stuff.
About our energy struggles with China and how China's trying to dominate the fusion market, and what kinds of weapons fusion will allow that make atomic weapons look like firecrackers. So that's what I was referring to there, Michael. Yeah, you beat the guy senseless. It was a joy to watch. I mean, I love watching, good fighters dueling, even with somebody who he was game, but he didn't quite have the skill to match up to you. And let's face it, he had a hard subject.
It's interesting. And after this, we can get to the next story. But I'll tell you this: when I first got on Twitter, so I was only out of prison, I don't know, 2 months, and I was only on Twitter because my friend told me I had to get on Twitter if I wanted to promote myself. And this guy who was calling himself Rich Brilliant said, "Hey, how would you like to come on our show, the Ayn Rand Fan Club?" I said, "That sounds great. I'm getting myself booked on shows. Well, that's wonderful." And the guy from yesterday was one of 2 people that were on that hosted this Ayn Rand Fan Club. And lo and behold, we were on. I just thought we're going to have a discussion. And it turned out they were Trump supporters. And you have to understand that I wasn't ever in contact with objectivists or anybody considering themselves objectivists. I was stunned that anybody associated with objectivism would support Donald Trump. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. And by the way, I would have been just as stunned had they been supporting Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or anybody else. But these 2 guys, Scott Schiff and William Swig, were actually defending him. So that's how I got to know those guys. And I ended up blocking Scott Schiff everywhere because he just comes with, like he did yesterday, with points that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's always, yeah, what about Biden, or what about Hillary, or what about this one? It's never just what we're actually discussing. But that's how, so William Swig saw my challenge, for anybody that would like to debate or some such thing. And he commented, I said, well, look, I said, my offer's for everyone. You want to debate it? We'll debate it. And that's how I ended up having him on yesterday.
Wow. Well, the fact that you didn't have any contact with objectivists before you were outside the prison walls actually says quite a bit about you. So you haven't ingested these ideas secondhand. Yeah, you're not regurgitating.
No, it's all from.
Yeah, you're not regurgitating.
This is my copy. Can you see it? I guess not. The background of Leonard Peikoff's Objectivism. The thing's fallen apart completely. I've read it so many times. It's taken so many notes.
And self-digested manual on philosophy. You didn't have anybody telling you the right way or the wrong way to do it all on your own. That's great. Scott was a pest on Euron's channel. I guess he continuously harasses objectivists. Is this his thing?
Yes, he's just Trump. And if you disagree with Trump, you're on the left. It's so irrational and illogical. It's just silly. And I don't mind being disagreed with. I really don't. But that's not what we're talking about. Let's move on. And you just want to keep coming with the same thing. Now you're not adding value of any kind. And so then you got to go.
Indeed. That's where whataboutism really is an attempt to evade the real topic at hand. So, Michael, you said we were going to move on to something else, even though I don't know that we solved this one yet. What?
I don't know that we're going to solve it, but we have our conclusion.
Our conclusion is, you want to take it away?
The policy sucks. It's a sick, gross violation of individual rights and property rights.
Do you think this requires an amendment to the Constitution to change the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment?
Yes. Okay. I mean, in simple terms, but not to do away with what is happening in I think it was Ithaca or Utica. I get them confused, and not what happened in New London. That would just take reading what the Constitution actually says. It wouldn't need an amendment.
Okay, but do you believe that the public has any right?
No.
The public has no right over private property to take it whatsoever. So
no.
Even if they're offering due compensation, this is interesting because this goes to the subjective value of price.
First thought that came to my mind.
if somebody doesn't want to sell their home that on the market would sell for $400,000 for $1 million, even though the government is offering it to them, a lot of people would say, well, that's crazy. Well, no, it's not, because that home means something to that person within it different than it means to you. And the price apparently isn't high enough. Now, you could think that one holdout is just trying to exploit the government and its private property to hold a knife to their throats.
Yes.
But whether that's the case or not is irrelevant.
So let me illustrate the principle here. The book that I have, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, it has a cover price of $20. I don't think I even paid that much. I think I bought it for $12.95 in 2005. The story behind it is this. My father said to me, because I was incarcerated, he knew that he probably wouldn't make it through my incarceration, which he didn't. Neither did my mother. And he said to me, I want to buy you something. I want to buy you a chain so that you can, you'll have it to remember me by. You can wear this chain. And I said, well, listen, I have no interest in wearing a chain. I said, if you want to get me something to remember you by, why don't you get me these 3 books? And we went back and forth. And I said, listen, if you want me to have something to remember you, why not be something that I value, not what you would value, being the chain? So I had him buy me, he ultimately agreed. I had him buy me Faith and Freedom by Thomas Saz, Capitalism by George Reisman, and Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. I still have this book. It's 20 years later. The book is falling apart. Pages are falling apart. The binding's broken. It's dog-eared and underlined and notes and everything else. So if someone came to me and said, I'll give you $50,000 for it, obviously the book value of it wouldn't be $50,000, but I wouldn't sell it because it has extreme meaning to me, because of who gave it to me, because of the story that I just told you of how I came to have it, because of the benefit it's brought to me and my friends. So now the government is going to step in and say, no, Michael, your valuation of that book is unreasonable. And so we're going to take it for the archives or whatever. It's ridiculous. And it's just as ridiculous with a home.
Indeed. And the sooner people realize this, I think the more just community will have. Now, you said other stories. Do you want to actually talk about the stories that I sent you? Did you read those things?
Of course I did. What do you think I do? You send me stories to read and I'm like, yeah,
check this.
Of course I read them.
I always like your stories better. So I thought,
well, you could talk about Trump yesterday with the, we could talk about Trump and then we can talk about the Newsom story. How about that?
Okay, but I also like this other pro-Colombia, pro-Palestinian protester.
Oh yeah, that one too. Okay, go with that one first.
By ICE, because I think this is an important thing. Look, I had a long discussion with James Valiant the other day about Mahmoud Khalil, and both of us, you and I, feel the same way, that there's a lot of shady goings on here with respect to due process, no question about it, and change of venue that happened because they took the kid out of New York and posted him in some prison in Louisiana. All of that smells to high heaven to me. And also, I guess there is a real concept in law, according to James Valiant, who I have to believe because he's an expert in these things and I am not. So I have to take him at his word for now. There is a difference, I guess, in legal rights coverage respecting citizens and non-citizens. I think that's despicable. If that's a case of law, it needs to be changed. Once you are in the United States of America, irrespective of your immigration status, you fall under the umbrella of our constitutional protections. That means you have due process like every other individual who's here.
James Madison would agree with you, by the way.
James Madison, and I think James Valiant agreed with me as well.
In principle,
but
yeah.
He made a fantastic point about Khalil, which I wasn't even thinking about. Khalil was the chief negotiator between the Columbia students and the administration at Columbia. And James called him an extortionist. Extortion is a crime. Now, this was a true way of looking at what Mahmoud Khalil was doing. In effect, he was bartering for a group of violent students who had taken over buildings, vandalized buildings, threatened Jewish students with physical harm, physically kept them from going to classes. And he was bartering for them, I guess, under the threat of causing more duress in the university. That is extortion. And the fact that he was a participant, directly or indirectly, in the crimes that these students were committing makes him a criminal and subject to deportation. And that's probably why the immigration judge decided in favor of the deportation, in favor on the side of Trump. Now, so I agree. In fact, I ended the show with James with a little message to Mahmoud Khalil. Have fun in Syria. That was my parting gift to him. I have come to the conclusion that despite these flaws in due process, he probably should be deported. But we cannot ever step away from due process, regardless of how distasteful the individual is to us. Rights are to protect the unpopular, and that doesn't mean just the obnoxious, as Madison would have said. Unpopular could be the extremely rational. Let's face it. Objectivism is a fringe movement right now, and liberty itself is unpopular with the general, with America, with the world. As a matter of fact, I would say the people who believe in unfettered liberty are an extreme minority. So that means that due process can be deprived from us because we are the minority and the majority.
Well, here's the problem, and Alan Thomas hit this out of the park. So indict on those crimes at the time instead of what the U.S. Inc. has done. That's the problem. If he's a criminal, prove it. If he's committed these crimes, prove it. I'm hearing that he's done these things. I've also seen alternate accounts. Obviously, I don't have the time to dive in and figure out what's true and what's not when you have conflicting accounts. But a court certainly can in front of a jury, and that's what they should do. But they're not doing that. I don't even believe they've accused him of a crime, Mark. I understand that people are saying he committed a crime, but I'm pretty sure he actually hasn't been accused of a crime.
Immigration judge, now I think it should be in the hands of a jury too, because that is the people's control of the legal system itself. That's a check on judiciary overstep. I think a jury of his peers should review this case and see the evidence and decide whether or not he should be deported as a penalty as well. That's a great thought, Alan. But according to James, I'm taking James's word for it. James may be able to, if he's listening, he may be able to weigh in on this. The judge determined, based on the evidence that he looked at, that this case met the standard of proof for him to be deported. I guess under the provisions that they're doing it with, which is this law that the Secretary of State can withhold and or take away visas if the person is in some way negatively affecting foreign policy of the United States of America. Now that's a scary prospect that this law even exists, to be honest with you, because we're talking quite apart from espionage or murder or any crimes against people. We're talking about negatively affecting the foreign policy of America, which quite frankly, maybe objectivists negatively affect the foreign policy of America with the way that we talked about the foreign policy.
Yeah, it's such bull. I don't know. Listen, first of all, okay. Does the Constitution, if we're constitutionalists, allow to deport people? Not what laws have been passed, because we criticize what laws have been passed, whether they're constitutional or not. So does the Constitution allow for people to be deported because they're accused of a crime? If you're saying that, well, the Alien and Sedition Act, I don't know if that was this thing, it might have been something else, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But if the claim is that, we're at war with whom? Who are we at war with? When did Congress wage a war? It hasn't. The only people that can wage war are Congress. So our foreign policy is being affected. Our foreign policy is being affected far more by Trump and the people in Congress on both sides than it ever was by Mahmoud Khalil. Right? So I agree. If these guys committed crimes philosophically, now you have to separate things, right? Philosophically and constitutionally. My personal philosophical opinion is, or conviction is, that we can rightfully keep criminals out or send criminals back, right?
Yes.
But the next question is, does the Constitution allow for that? And the Constitution, at least according to James Madison, only allows us to kick kick people out in cases of actual invasion. And by invasion, he wasn't being funny with the word as we do nowadays, referring to migrant farmers as invaders. He's talking about actual armies, militaries from other nations coming in. So while the law may have evolved and changed so as, yes, indeed, they can send him out just because he's accused as a criminal, I would argue by the original meaning of the federal constitution, they don't have that authority. Also, I would say, as a philosophical principled matter, that to allow the federal government or anybody else to lock people up based on accusations of what they've done is so wrong and so dangerous. I mean, at that point, all they have to do is come along and say, hey, this guy's not an American. He's committed a crime. We're getting him out of here. You say, oh, I'm a criminal. I'm an American. Give me my due process. Fuck you. You don't get your due process. You're out. Right? It's so dangerous and so wrong-headed. Look, this Mahmoud, whatever, Khalil might be an awful human being. Right? But that's not the point. The point is what is a just system? What is the type of system that's going to uphold our rights? What is the system that's going to be in line with the original meaning of the United States Constitution? And also, as somebody in here pointed out, they're now talking about, and we talked about this the other day, and Trump mentioned it again yesterday, deporting American citizens. Yeah. It doesn't just stop here. And that kind of goes back to what we talked about before. Once you start granting them this authority, it doesn't stop. They will take and take and take until we stop them. Absolutely. So, but the article actually wasn't even about Khalil. It was about this other chap.
Right. It's now, this is about, an associate of Khalil for sure.
Yes.
This is by Nathan Worcester, and it's from the Epoch Times, I believe. And Columbia University student Moshin Madawi was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement on April 14th during a naturalization interview in Vermont. And the move comes weeks after the detention of Madawi's Columbia associate Mahmoud Khalil, as the Trump administration continues to target non-citizen students in a crackdown on alleged support for Hamas during the university protests in the wake of October 7, 2023 attacks by the terrorist group on Israel. In January, President Trump signed an executive order that allows non-citizen students to be deported for expressing views aligned with Hamas and accused protesters of anti-Semitic activities on campuses. Now,
I got a question. Seriously, what does it mean to express opinions aligned with Hamas? I mean, I know what in this specific case, what this organization was accused of. And if true, and if this guy's tied to that organization and they can prove it, I would be all for getting him out. I'm not denying that. But just that language bothers me. If you say something aligned with Hamas, because I'm guessing Hamas has said an awful lot of things. So how much alignment do I have to have with Hamas before it's a crime or before they can kick me out?
And accused of anti-Semitic activities on campus, which the activities, of course, is an open-ended concept. It could be holding an anti-Semitic sign, shouting an anti-Semitic slogan, or it could be, barring Jews from class or beating them up. Now, there's a huge spectrum of activity that incorporates, most of which are not violent. In other words, not rights violating. As damnable as they are and as disgusting as they are, and as much as I would like to see them off campus, they're not violating your rights by saying what they say. It may hurt your feelings. It sucks that people like this exist in the world, but they are not violating your rights and cannot be arrested or deported for holding views that we find repugnant, that in fact are repugnant, or even making those views known by publishing them or talking them out loud to people. So long as they're not hurting you, threatening you, preventing your physical body from doing what you need to do, they're not violating your rights. And this sets a dangerous precedent for anybody who is unpopular or at odds with the administration, threatens the foreign policy or domestic policy of the United States administration. You can be next. So as much as I loathe to stand up for people like Khalil, who's a scum of the earth, and his buddy here, who's a scum of the earth, I say that not knowing the people personally, but knowing them well enough because of what they protest for. because of their ideology. Palestinianism is a political ideology. It's an orientation to the world. It's not an ethnic group. It's an orientation to Jews.
Well, I got a question, Mark, about this, right? My rabbi, when I was in prison, Rabbi Sheckman, great guy who I learned so much from. And when I ultimately stopped believing in God, because I could no longer do it, and I knew that atheism was where I was, I went to services and I told him, Rabbi, I just want you to know I want to keep coming because I learned so much from you. But I told him, but I no longer believe in God. And he said, that's okay. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, in Judaism, we're more concerned with what you do than what you believe. So I actually, at one point, I don't know if it was me, but a guy in the service was arguing with the rabbi, and the guy in the service said that that the Palestinians should not have a state. My rabbi, who is also a Republican, he said, no, I think the Palestinians should have a state. And his reasoning was, if they don't have a state, then the government of Israel ends up having to take care of them. Now, we can agree with that or disagree with it. That's not my point. My only point is that clearly he was not aligned with Hamas and clearly not an anti-Semite. So does anybody that comes out, and this is why this stuff is so touchy for me, because, okay, aligned with Hamas, or you're expressing views that are anti-Semitic, well, then somebody's got to determine what's anti-Semitic. Is saying I think the Palestinians should have a state anti-Semitic? Is critiquing Israeli foreign policy anti-Semitic? I mean, when does it stop? Now, obviously, there's things I clearly see that I know are anti-Semitic. I just don't like the idea of the federal government deciding these issues, of them saying without a trial, with nothing, oh, this is anti-Semitism, get the guy out. It just seems a very slippery slope to me.
Indeed, they should be defining parameters of force, and when it is that these ideas are concretized in such a way as to harm other people, right? Certainly, protesters preventing Jewish students from going to class, that is a violation of the students' rights.
Yes, no doubt.
Those people should be punished. They should be probably expelled, suspended, punished. By law or by the university, or physically harming property, physically harming other people. Those are ways in which these individuals violate the rights of others, but not by holding their points of view. As much as I don't think universities are places of protest, and that people can occupy, the commons in the area and post tents there and protest in that way. They should be going to class and doing their thing. This shouldn't be allowed by the university. If it's a private university, it's their rules, it's their property. Unfortunately, as usual, these rules get blurred and the concept of rights get blurred because these universities are taking hundreds of millions of dollars in government subsidies to promote research. They shouldn't. One of the good effects of all this is that these major universities who have multi-billion-dollar endowments are taking billions of dollars from the United States Treasury, and they shouldn't be. Harvard is supposed to be a private university. Columbia is supposed to be a private university. They can fund themselves, and they can live off of their endowments. They don't need any subsidization from the government, which is unfortunately using this. The Trump administration, by taking away the subsidization of the federal government, isn't making the claim, we don't owe you any subsidization because we're the federal government and you're a private institution. They're making the claim that we're holding this over your head because of your political points of view, and until that changes, we're going to keep withholding it. If you step back in line with the administration's perspective, we're going to give it back to you. So again, none of this is a principled orientation. It's just a simple attack against a point of view that the administration disagrees with, that I disagree with. But the real problem is here. Look, no private institution should be subsidized by the American people's tax dollars, period. So deprive them of that without the pretense of doing it under the guise of anti-Semitism. So Madawi's attorneys, of course, issued a habeas corpus petition the same day as his detention on April 14th. And it alleges his detention violates the First and Fifth Amendments. I'm saying that's true so far. Saying the student's speech regarding Israel's military campaign in Gaza, human rights, international law obligations arising from international law, and related matters in speech is protected by the First Amendment. Now, all that's true. And Mr. Madawi is fearful that if he loses his lawful permanent resident status, he will be removed to the West Bank. Well, I'd be afraid of that as well. He will experience the same harassment, detention, and torture that his family has experienced, and it would be even more danger in the light of the campaigns that are against him and targeting him. And I would respectfully submit to Mr. Madawi that he wouldn't necessarily be tortured or detained by the Israeli people, but most likely by the Palestinian Authority and by Abbas. It's the Palestinians who are the great oppressors of the Palestinians, even in the West Bank, I hate to say. According to the filing, Madawi was born in a refugee camp in the West Bank and co-founded a Palestinian student group called DAR at Columbia with Khalil. Now, do you have any idea what this student group does?
I saw that they posted something. They're very anti Western civilization. They said they posted something on Instagram about undermining Western civilization or abolishing some. I don't remember the exact language. Something very anti-West. And I gotta say, like, my first reaction to that was, yes, we should get them out if it's proven that they have that. But I just don't know, like, to me, the most important thing important elements of Western civilization are reason, freedom, capitalism, right? And I have a hard time saying the way to defend those things is by acting in ways that are opposite to them, right? So, yeah, they're speaking against Western civilization. Yes, I hate that. But should we kick people out of the country for that? I mean, if they're advocating war or picking up weapons or anything of that nature, violence, then yeah. But as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I don't think that you should be kicking people out for those views.
As you said, he joined with the Columbia University Apartheid and Divest Coalition, and their stated goals include the total eradication of Western civilization. Now,
yeah.
I don't see how you eradicate Western civilization without a great deal of violence. So clearly, these folks align themselves with.
Sure. Well, that can be argued, but are they talking about intellectually or are they talking about violence?
They said our intifada is an international one.
Okay, yeah. So maybe that's what I was reacting to earlier, and I forgot about it.
Clearly, this is incitement. I mean, this is a type of incitement.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I forgot that they had said the intifada thing.
So we don't know. Khalil's sort of affiliated with this group. This guy Madawi is affiliated with this group. We don't know yet the extent of Khalil's corruption, although I can imagine it. It still has to be proven in the court of law. But this guy's behind, the global intifada movement, which is a violent movement. Let's face it, folks. If you're on the streets calling for a global intifada, you're calling for a global revolution. You want bad things to happen to people. You are inciting violence. And you are often violent in these protests, if any of you are listening to us right now. This guy is an interesting bag of tricks, and right now he claims to be a Buddhist, by the way, which I find unusual that a Buddhist would go to these militant protest rallies and involve himself in an organization that wants to eradicate the West and make a jihad global. Do you think a Buddhist can last in a global jihad? I thought that makes him sort of on this.
This gets tricky. Like the word jihad just means struggle, right? Now, I understand that the way that it's used in practice is in warfare. And I just looked up what intifada means, and it means shaking off or uprising. Now, I also understand that what it has meant in practice, but you have to know what they mean when they use these terms. If he's talking about engaging in global protest, sure, he could do it. If you're talking about violence, then I think violence is against Buddhism, or Buddhism is against violence.
As you put it together. Mixed premises. Regardless of his premises and regardless of the kinds of ideas he's supported while being in the United States of America, ideas that I find totally and utterly detestable. I hate to say this, but I agree with Bernie Sanders. He is entitled. to
Sure.
process.
Now, no doubt about it for me. No doubt he's entitled to due process.
Now, why is it that the left, or some of those on the left, and people I find absolutely reprehensible on the left, like a Bernie Sanders, an irredeemably bad guy, but here he is coming out for due process. Now, is it simply because it's to sow more chaos? It's against the administration right now. It throws mud in the eye of the administration at the moment. Do you think Bernie Sanders really believes in the concept of due process? As a guy who spent his honeymoon in Moscow.
Well, I think a lot of it is just whatever party's out of power opposes whatever the party in power does. But the left has traditionally been pro civil liberties. I mean, pro due process, that sort of thing, prisoners' rights. So it wouldn't be inconsistent in that regard. It would be inconsistent. It's inconsistent of them to uphold what they call civil liberties, but oppose economic liberties. You know what I mean? So there's an abundance of contradictions there. But I do think the left, traditionally, I would expect the left to be opposed to this kind of thing.
It's crazy. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, was basically founded by communist sympathizers, and threw their weight initially behind, defending communist protesters and people who are being targeted for their communist perspectives. But we have to remember at the time that communism was a party that especially the Communist Party USA, took its marching orders from the Kremlin, and their fidelity was not to the United States of America, it was to the Soviet Union. And they were doing things to bring that about. They were engaging in violence, fomenting chaos, causing riots in the streets, using the labor movement discord to sow more violence and discord, and to bring more people into the Communist Party. They were committing acts of espionage. They were stealing secrets, state secrets, sending them to the Soviet Union. And as David Horowitz, who wrote a book called Radical Son, he was the son of communists. He became a card-carrying communist himself. He was one of the first people at Berkeley University to start Ramparts magazine, and started the first anti-Vietnam protest there. He said, look, a dentist and a little old grandmother were part of the communist fellow traveler chain that passed the notes along to the assassin that killed Trotsky in Mexico. I mean, this is a network of people that engage in criminal activities and or support them. There's also a very famous movie called Running on Empty about a communist couple with their kids who are.
Oh yeah, River Phoenix. Is River Phoenix in it?
Phoenix is in it. Yeah, they bombed this place. Somebody died, so they're actually criminals on the run. And there's the normal people who are fellow travelers who harbor them. The number of people it's disturbing, to say the least. So, I mean, that's a criminal organization committing actual crimes in the United States. There's a reason they were outlawed in 54, 56, somewhere in there. I could see why they were outlawed. This is bucking up against that. It's getting close to the area of committing overt criminal acts for the purpose of sabotaging, the West and the United States of America, subverting law and order. It's definitely in that arena, but they have to prove this in the court of law with this guy, and that's how Americans stick to the principle of reason subordinating force to right. That's the whole premise behind the United States of America and what makes us unique. I don't know that we have that much time to deal with it.
We do not. We're just about out of time.
Yeah. So since I gave the last Liberty thought or whatever.
Sure, I'll do it today. No problem. I think most people agree that we have the right to our own lives, that we have the right to make our own decisions and to live how we would like to, as long as we respect the rights of other people to do the same. But the only way for our right to life to be properly implemented is if we have the right to take the actions necessary to sustain it, which necessarily means the right to property. We should be upholding property rights whenever we can and whenever it's necessary to do so. We should be fighting against those who want to deprive us of property rights. And that includes courts who think that eminent domain should be abused. It includes fighting against the principle of eminent domain to begin with. It includes the asset forfeiture stuff where they accuse people of crimes and confiscate their property. We really need to develop a culture that respects property rights. And with that, Mark, I turn it back over to you and your great new microphone.
Thank you. I love this microphone.
We had no complaints today.
Good. Thank God. I should say thank Dad, since I did play Lucifer on Supernatural. Yes, without property, there is no right. That is the material implementation of our right in the world. That's the way we practice rights in the world, is through property. So you can't have rights without property. Alan Thomas really quickly said Harvard, SpaceX, Boeing, Chevron, GM, no difference. That's right. Let's desubsidize them all. That's what we would do in the American Capitalist Party, save the American citizens the trouble that Trump seems to want to put us into.
We have Greg Lewis wants to register a complaint.
Go ahead, Greg.
Register your complaint before we go. Let's see if you can get it in there.
Get it in. Get it in. I have another show I have to be on.
Do you?
Yeah. Ayn Rand Center UK wants me to help them with the reality show, so I'm going to pop in there. I told them I'd be late because they're doing our competitive show first, which I also announced on ARC UK.
Awesome. Okay, well, Greg Lewis isn't making it. Greg Lewis is saying, wrap it up, guys. All right, Greg. I think he wants to get to the other show as well.
Oh, okay.
All right, Greg, Mark, take us out.
All right, folks. Well, come tomorrow. Visit us tomorrow. We're here, same bat time, same bat place. We'll be discussing current events from a capitalist point of view. Make sure you look up AmericanCapitalistParty.org. Join, donate, and become a member and help us spread the word of capitalism. Remember to follow Michael Liebowitz on his social media accounts. Listen to the Rational Egoist. Listen to the debate he did right here yesterday, and be enlightened. And always remember to check your premises. Peace.